Hey y'all, we are on day 48. It's my birthday, but I am so happy to be here still. We have two Psalms to get through today, Psalms 90 and 91, and with this we have moved into book 4 of the Psalms. So what does that mean? Well, we are going to see more than a couple of Psalms here which appear to have been written prior to David, prior to Saul. So they are written in the context usually of the Exodus, before any kings had been anointed. We will also see that many of these Psalms are anonymous, although we will see the return of a couple of Davidic Psalms. And then overall, we will see that the theme of these Psalms is kind of God's reign, the Lord's reign, and we will see God's sovereignty be focused in on during a lot of these Psalms, throughout a lot of these Psalms. All right, so as usual, please like this video, please share, comment, and if you're not subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and do that. Let's get into these Psalms, y'all. Okay, so I'm starting with Psalm 90. I'm reading from the ESV. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting you are God. You return man to dust and say, Return, O children of man. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80, yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger, and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. This psalm is accredited to Moses, so this is obviously one of the older psalms. The central theme of this would be time, both God's eternal time and our human natural time. Looking at this factor of time, we see that God's is from everlasting to everlasting, but then we have the comparison of the human time, which is very minute. In verses 5 and 6, it says it's like grass renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. So we see that human life is really nothing. It's like a day past. In this psalm, you see this kind of this question pop out, like how are we supposed to live during this short amount of time? And so it's really asking for wisdom on what God wants us to do with our time on earth. If we look to verse 4, this is probably a little bit familiar. It's used also in 2 Peter chapter 3 and verses 8 and 9 to remind us to be patient as we wait for God's promises to come to fruition, as we wait on God's work. And it says, Dear friends, don't forget that for the Lord 1 day is the same as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is the same as 1 day. The Lord isn't slow about keeping his promises, as some people think he is. In fact, God is patient because he wants everyone to turn from sin and no one to be lost. So as we move through the middle of this psalm, we find ourselves looking at God's wrath as if this psalm couldn't get any more depressing. We see that even in our best days, there is pain and there is sorrow. And I think we can look at this as a fact of living in a fallen world, that there will always be sadness and evil around us. But I also read verses 7 through 11 here, and I think about how amazing the gift of Jesus Christ is. That we no longer have to live under the burden that Moses is talking about here. That we have access to freedom from God's wrath through Jesus Christ. And I think sometimes we don't grasp just how amazing it is to have that freedom. And then as we move into the latter part of this psalm, we see the petition to God for wisdom, even the petition to God to lengthen life, to kind of make up for this time lost under God's wrath, to make up for all of the pain and the bitterness. And really what it's doing is appealing to God's love and grace here. For my revelation, I just want to kind of discuss this, what do we do with life since it's so short question. To me, this strengthens the notion that our focus should really be on the eternal. That our focus, all of our works, everything we do should be aimed towards where we are going after this life, because our life here on earth is so short. It is so fleeting. YOLO and all that is great, and I believe that we should live life to our best. I think that we should enjoy our lives because Jesus Christ has given us the freedom to do so. But we also have to question, we also have to consider, at what point are you risking where you will spend eternity? I believe that you can be a believer. I believe that you can be righteous. I believe that you can be close to God and still live a fun life. But it just may not look the way society makes it look, right? So there's actually 2 verses in here that are kind of instruction to us on how we should live our lives. And the first is in verse 12. It says, "Teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom." In James Limburg book, it's in the description. This is what it looks like. He quotes Martin Luther, who took it upon himself to translate this verse into German. And what it says is, "Teach us to reflect on the fact that we must die so that we become wise." In other words, show us how to take advantage of the time we have here on earth, and give us the godly wisdom to do it righteously. Catch that? Give us wisdom on how to live our life, but show us also how to do it in such a way that we aren't throwing away our eternal promises. The second verse here that gives us instruction is verse 17. It says, "Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us." Yes, establish the work of our hands. To me, this verse implies that not only are we to ask God daily to show us the work that he wants us to do, to show us how we spend our time, but also that everything we do should be for and unto God. And even further, we ask that God prospers our work, that everything we do have impact, and that we aren't just living our lives for naught, that there is this part of us, or I guess the whole of us, that is doing glory, that is giving glory to God, right? That it's for God and it's for good. And so while this psalm comes off a little depressing, I think that it also speaks to how we manage our expectations in life, and also how we manage our lives in general, how we are spending our time, how we are living our lives. What are we doing right now to ensure that when this day is over, we will spend the rest of eternity with God. Okay? All right, we are going to move into Psalm 91. The topics are a little bit heavy today. As you all probably know, Psalm 91 we have seen a lot of over the past 3 months, so I'm going to take a little bit extra time and dive into these verses, give a little bit of clarity so that we understand what we are saying when we quote this scripture. I'm going to read from the New King James Version. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him I will trust. Surely He shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. He shall cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. You shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor of the destruction that lays waste at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. Only with your eyes shall you look, and see the reward of the wicked. Because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place, no evil shall befall you, nor any plague come near your dwelling. For He shall give His angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways. In their hands they shall bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. You shall tread upon the lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you shall trample underfoot. Because He has set His love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high, because he has known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. All right, so like I said, we have seen this a lot during this COVID-19 season as it relates to a plague. Before I get into this, I just want to put this little disclaimer in there. What I'm about to say is my opinion. I'd like to say it's my knowledge based on all of the study I have done on this psalm by looking at many different commentaries, by looking at the Hebrew and kind of sorting through this, taking it verse by verse and just cutting it down, cutting it into pieces and understanding. Now, with that being said, you may come out of this with a different revelation. Perhaps God has shown you something in here that you are using for a specific reason. That's fine. That's fine. Like I always say, if you got something different out of the psalm, if you see something different, comment, share. Let's have a dialogue about what this psalm means to you and what it means to me. And, that's how we grow in the Lord. That's how we grow together as believers. So let's get into this. Obviously, the theme for this psalm is God as refuge, right? We see that He protects, He preserves, and He rescues. The words used in this psalm, both in the Hebrew and in English, portray these protective factors of God. We see shelter, shadow, refuge, fortress, the feather coverings, and the under the wing metaphors. And that's what allows for the trust to come out in this psalm. The trust is coming from a place of shelter and security, if that makes sense. We'll see, take for example, verse 4. It says, He shall cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. This verse right here encompasses kind of the vastness of God's protection, the vastness of God as refuge. Not only is He as gentle and tender as a mother hen shielding her chicks under her wing, He is also strong in that, He is strong and powerful in that we have the necessary armor to go out in battle. Okay? But there is a caveat that we need to look at here. And this caveat comes in the very first line of this psalm. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High. Now again, some people may take this line to to mean whomever seeks God, whomever believes that God is their dwelling place. To me, through my study, I believe that this is separating those who are inconsistent with those who truly dwell in God. I believe that this is saying that not everyone receives this kind of security. Not even every believer receives this sort of security. It's available to the one who has a close, a personal and intimate relationship with God. Someone who is not who isn't going back and forth, who is consistent. And I come to that because the Hebrew here means to remain or to stay. So in translating this, I take it to mean more of the one who stays with God, the one who remains with God, not the one who's back and forth. And thus, this protection, all of the assets that are listed then in the rest of the psalm, are only accessible to the ones who remain in God, not to the lukewarm Christian. So let's move forward into some of these verses, okay? During this time, verses 3 through 8 is really what people have been focusing in on because it fits. It really does fit. But this psalm is also metaphorical, and it has different meanings according to how we are looking at it, either naturally or spiritually. So take, for example, verse 3, the snare of the fowler. Well, in the natural, this is a metaphor for anything that we don't see coming, right? Sudden death, trauma, accidents, things that just come out of nowhere we have no warning about. But spiritually, the snare of the fowler is referring to the tricks and the temptations of the enemy. It's those temptations that we don't know are really that dangerous until it's too late, until we have put the foot on the trap. Okay? And in the same respect, the pestilence in the natural is, of course, disease, famine, whatever you may call it. These are more of just dangers that are present that we can see coming towards us. But in the spiritual, it is referring more to curses and sin. And it's referring to sin that is pervasive, sin that is infectious, sin that is contagious, as Matthew Henry would say here. Right? So from a spiritual aspect, this is talking about sin and the enemy. And with that, I just want to say too that it's not all a negative. We see here that if we are in that dwelling place with God, we have sort of this immunity to the tricks, to the temptations, just as it is saying that God protects us from the natural. God also protects us from the spiritual. Okay? So now I want to bring some clarity to verse 7. When you look at this verse, and many people use this, you can't separate it from the following verse, because verse 8 actually gives the context in which verse 7 is occurring. So why are 1,000 falling at the side? Why are 10,000 falling at the right hand? Well, in verse 8, we see it is actually because God is pouring out his wrath. He is rewarding the wicked. So these verses are actually speaking to the righteous versus the unrighteous. And going back to verse 1 then, this indicates that those who dwell with God will not be punished as the wicked or as the unrighteous are. Okay? Then moving through verse 9, we see this conditional protection of God. Because you have made the Lord your dwelling place. Again, there has to be an action before you receive the thing from God. You have to make God your dwelling place. Then it goes forward into, say, verses 11 and 12, where God starts speaking about the angels and how he charges them to protect us and lift us. And this also is a metaphor for the supernatural help we receive from God. And I'm not saying, angels aren't real. I'm just saying this also is a metaphor for any supernatural way God intercedes for us. again, in verse 11 and 12, the enemy is actually uses this against Jesus when he is tempting him in the wilderness. So we kind of see that the theme here that we're kind of pulling out is that this is about the enemy. Okay? And continuing with that theme, in verse 13, you shall tread upon the lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you shall trample underfoot. Again, we're talking about the enemy. It's the same, Jesus declaring to his disciples that they have the authority to trample on all snakes and scorpions and so on. So finally, we go to verses 14 through 16, and the speaker changes to God. And basically, he is confirming that he hears and he answers and that he is a deliverer and a rescuer. He speaks to this long life and salvation, which I'm going to talk a little bit more here as I move into my revelation. And I really hope that my revelation here is not a bubble burster for you, but I want to move a little bit more into the clarity here. If we look at this psalm purely from a spiritual perspective, it really has no application to what we use it for. It's a commentary on the enemy, on the traps he sets on sin, and on dwelling with God in order to overcome sin and the plot of the enemy. Now, with that being said, I think it's okay to use this psalm during this time in the natural, but we still have to use it in the context that it was intended to be used. Going back to verse 7 as an example, we typically use it in a way that no hurt or harm or danger is going to come close to us, even if it's pervasive and happening all around us. But here, and for us as believers in Christ, this actually means that the righteous will not face God's wrath. And so it's still a point of praise. It's still a verse to stand on. It just means something a little bit different than what we typically use it for. And again, I'm not saying you can't necessarily use it that way, but you have to understand the context in order to really convey what it means, okay? And then another point of clarity here is that this psalm does not mean, nor does it even imply, that we are exempt from bad situations. This psalm is not saying we won't have distress. This psalm is not saying that illness won't hit us, or that death won't hit us, or that any other bad thing in the world won't happen to us. It's all in the way in which we view God's goodness in the context of a bad situation. For example, we could see a situation as harmful and as terrible and bad, but it could be an act of God's love. It could be an act of God's goodness that we just can't comprehend as part of God's will. So it's what we look at here. When we use it in a certain way, it gives us this feel-good feeling because we're standing on it to mean that God's going to protect us from any harm or danger. And yes, God is our protector, and he does save us from many dangers, seen and unseen. However, as God's children, we have to go through everything on earth that everyone else does. And so if we kind of remove the rose-colored glasses, if we remove this film of prosperity that often covers our eyes, we begin to see that God's inherent goodness is everywhere. It's just our humanness that gets in the way of it, if that makes sense to you. Things will happen to us, but can we see that God is still protecting us? If an arrow hits us, can we still say that, 1,000 may drop at one side, that 10,000 at the other? And I think those are the things that we really need to draw out of Psalms like these, that yes, they give us strength. Yes, they give us kind of a crutch to stand on while there's a lot of chaos surrounding us. But we also have to look at how God works even when these bad things do happen. So it's hard for me often to put this type of discussion into words. I just want to make sure that you are clear on what I am trying to say here, and for lack of my own words, I want to use a quote that I found when I was studying this psalm. It comes from Charles Spurgeon, and it kind of gives an overview of how we are to look at this psalm, and I'm going to leave you with this. It is impossible that any ill should happen to the man who is beloved of the Lord. The most crushing calamities can only shorten his journey and hasten him to his reward. Ill to him is no ill, but only good in mysterious form. Losses enrich him, sickness is his medicine, reproach is his honor, death is his gain. No evil in the strict sense of the word can happen to him, for everything is overruled for good. Happy is he who is in such a case. He is secure where others are in peril. He lives where others die. All right, I will see you on tomorrow.